Hello everybody, Connor here, and welcome back to another episode of Gaming Retrospective. Whenever people talk about the classic Sonic games for the Genesis, they usually talk about the first two Sonic games, Sonic 1 and 2. Which makes sense, these were the two best-selling games for the Sega Genesis. Although these two games are known for being some of the best games of all time, there's one game in the Sonic the Hedgehog series that took what made the first two games great and perfected it in every way. And that game is Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Sonic 3 is the fourth installment to the classic Sonic series, following Sonic CD, which was released only 4 months prior in September 1993. Similarly to Sonic 2, Sonic 3 was developed in America by Sega Technical Institute. After Sonic 2 was completed, the team was split in half, with one team working on Sonic 3, and the other team working on the spin-off game Sonic Spinball. Development for Sonic 3 started in January 1993. The original plan was for Sonic 3 to be a 3D game, taking advantage of the Sega Virtual Processing chip. They created a prototype with the working title Sonic 3D. It became apparent that the chip would not be completed by 1994, so the team went back to the drawing board, and Sonic 3 was decided to be a 2D platform game like the other three. Although the concept of Sonic playing in 3D was scrapped from this game, the concept was later used in Sonic 3D Blast in 1996. Just because Sonic 3 was unable to be 3D didn't mean they were going to skimp out on this game. This was planned to be the most ambitious Sonic game yet. Sonic 3 was planned to have a much deeper story than the previous games, telling the story visually with in-game cutscenes. Sonic 3 also introduced a brand new character to the series, Knuckles the Echidna. He was designed to be a rival to Sonic, representing power, while Sonic represented speed. One interesting thing about the development of Sonic 3 is the soundtrack. According to many sources, the King of Pop, Michael Jackson, worked on the soundtrack for this game. Michael Jackson was a huge Sonic fan and had already worked with Sega on the 1990 arcade game Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Unfortunately, Michael Jackson went uncredited for his work on Sonic 3, and the true reason was never revealed. Some people believe it was because he was unhappy with how the Genesis sounded, and others believe it may have been because of this. Luckily, Michael Jackson's music was already completed by the time he left the project, and some of his tracks made it into the final game. Carnival Night Zone, Ice Cap Zone, and the credits music share many similarities with Michael Jackson and his team's work. Jackson's involvement is one of the reasons why Sonic 3 doesn't get many re-releases. It was speculated that there's a copyright issue with some of the tracks in the game. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 released on February 2nd, 1994. Sega promoted the release by calling the day Hedgehog Day since it fell on the same day as Groundhog Day. I never owned the Sonic 3 cartridge as a kid, but I grew up with Sonic Mega Collection, which had a re-release of Sonic 3 and is where I got to experience the game as a kid. I remember enjoying this game a lot. I don't think I played it as much as Sonic 1, but I was actually able to get past the second zone in the game, which is a first. Now let's put this bad boy in the Genesis and boot up the game. Jump scare warning in 3, 2, 1. The title screen for Sonic 3 always stood out for me. I like the 3D model they used for Sonic. It may not look perfect, but it does have a certain level of charm to it. Starting the game takes you to the Save Select screen, a first for the series. If you get a game over, you're able to restart from the beginning of the zone instead of starting over from the beginning like other games. Here you have the option to play as Sonic, Tails, or Sonic and Tails together. Sadly, Knuckles isn't playable in the main game, but you can choose to play as him in the multiplayer competition mode. Sonic 3 starts out with a cutscene of Sonic and Tails flying in on their plane. Picking up right after the events of Sonic 2, the story for this game is that after Sonic defeated Eggman on the Death Egg, it crash-landed on the floating Angel Island. The force of the crash caused the island to fall into the ocean. After this, Dr. Eggman met Knuckles and convinced him that Sonic was trying to steal the Master Emerald, which caused him and Eggman to team up against him. The first thing you notice about this game is how much more detailed it is compared to the other ones. Sonic 1, 2, and CD were so brightly colored, but Sonic 3 goes for a much more natural look, which I'm a fan of. Sonic's sprite also gets a redesign, and while I like the Sonic 1 sprite the best, the Sonic 3 sprite still looks good. Sonic 3 controls just like the previous games with a few new additions. One of the biggest new additions to Sonic 3 was the new shields. Instead of the basic shield from the previous 3 games that allowed you to get an extra hit before losing rings, there's now 3 shields based off of the elements: fire, water, and electric. Each shield has a special ability alongside giving you an extra hit. The fire shield makes Sonic immune to fire and dash in the air. The bubble shield allows Sonic to breathe underwater and ground pound. And the electric shield makes Sonic invincible to electric attacks, pull in rings that are close by, and allows Sonic to double jump. The electric shield is easily my favorite. There's something so satisfying about speeding through the level and watching all the rings gravitate towards you. The spin dash also makes its return alongside a new move for Sonic, the Insta Shield. The Insta Shield can be activated by hitting the jump button when you're in the air. It extends Sonic's hitbox and gives him a temporary shield that can protect him from enemies. Another difference is the new level design. There's still 2 acts per zone, but the most noticeable difference is how much larger the levels are compared to the previous games. They're triple the size of the levels in Sonic 2. The new level design allows for many different pathways, and the game rewards the player for exploration. Sonic CD's levels were designed for exploration too, but the environments in Sonic 3 are so much better, and there's an actual reason to explore these levels. Unlike the previous games where the special stages are accessed by collecting 50 rings and reaching the end of the zone or a checkpoint, Sonic 3's special stages are hidden throughout the zones. You just have to find the big ring and jump into it to get to a special stage. Sonic 3 easily had the best special stages out of all the classic Sonic special stages. The objective is to collect all the blue spheres and try not to touch the red ones. The more time you spend in the special stage, the faster Sonic moves, and it gets really fast towards the end. The controls are very sensitive, so you have to make sure your turns or jumps are perfect. Once you collect the blue spheres, the special stage ends and you're awarded a Chaos Emerald. These special stages are great because they don't rely on luck or memorization. If you play them enough times, you'll get really good at them and have no trouble collecting the Chaos Emeralds. Just like Sonic 2, if you collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds and collect 50 rings, you can transform into Super Sonic, and he works exactly how he did in Sonic 2. The concept of accessing a secret level through the checkpoint wasn't completely forgotten about. If Sonic passes through a checkpoint with 50 or more rings, stars will appear over the checkpoint and you can access a bonus stage. The bonus stage is a gumball machine where Sonic can bounce himself up to get items using the bumper walls from Metropolis Zone from Sonic 2. Now let's talk about the actual zones. The first zone in this game is Angel Island Zone. This is similar to Green Hill Zone, but it gets engulfed in flames halfway through. What more could you ask for? Each act has its own boss now, and the zones transition into each other seamlessly. This helps add to the storytelling because it explains how Sonic gets to each zone. After Angel Island is Hydro City Zone, and it's easily one of the best zones in all of 2D Sonic. It's the designated water level of the game, but it's actually enjoyable. It's fast-paced and balances out the water sections so well. There's these water slides around the level, and they make for some great speed sections. And if you doubted Michael Jackson's involvement with this game, you can even make Sonic moonwalk across water. The next zone is Marble Garden. This zone has a lot of platforming sections with the tops. I remember never getting past this zone as a kid because I had trouble breaking through the walls with them. Looking at this zone now, it's decent. Nothing crazy good, but nothing crazy bad either. I always thought the boss fight was cool though. You utilize Tails' flying ability to battle Eggman in the sky. Moving on to Carnival Night Zone, this is my least favorite zone in the game. It can be frustrating at times. It's the longest zone in the game, and the platforming's a bit annoying. There's this one area in Act 2 that has a barrel that many players got stuck at. The issue is that many people had no idea how to move the barrel. Turns out you just hit up and down on the D-pad. One thing I always thought was cool was when Sonic runs into Knuckles in this zone and he shuts off the lights. If you're lucky enough to get past this zone, you'll get launched into Ice Cap Zone. Ice Cap Zone is another one of my favorites. The transition into this zone is great. Seeing Sonic snowboard down the hill for the first time was a core memory for me. The rest of the level consists of some platforming inside the caves and some outside sections. The zone looks so good and has the best music in the game by far. The next zone is Launch Base, and it's an interesting zone. There's a lot of platforming sections with some high speed sections to break up the pace. There's also a water section in Act 2 which I thought was interesting. And once you get through Launch Base Zone, the game ends. I remember feeling unfulfilled when I beat this game for the first time. It felt like it was just getting started and ended out of nowhere. I mean, there was kind of a final boss, but it didn't really feel like one because you had rings when you fought it. When I look back at it, Sonic 3 does have the same amount of zones as Sonic 1, and they're a lot longer too, but the ending of this game just feels so incomplete. Turns out, Sega planned to make this game much longer, but had to meet a deadline for a McDonald's Happy Meal promotion. Sonic 3 definitely feels the most well-rounded out of the 2D classic Sonic games. Is it as iconic as Sonic 1 and 2? Probably not, but I feel like that has to do with Sonic 3 not getting re-released as much as Sonic 1 and 2. Despite not being as iconic, I would say it's easily a better game than the first two. The gameplay is just so much more refined compared to the other games. Sonic 1 and 2 definitely have higher highs than Sonic 3, but the lows are so much lower. My only criticism is that Sonic 3 feels like half a game. The story ends right as it's getting started, the Death Egg crashes back down onto the island, and the game kinda ends there. If only Sega released a part 2 to this game to finish off the story and allowed the developers to flesh out their ideas that couldn't make it in the final game. Oh wait,